All right, Trails Collective World, thank you for being with us for this week's round of the TC Live and weekly rundown for the Trails Collective. This is streaming live on my personal Facebook page for all of you who are already connected, as well as the Trails Collective Facebook page and the YouTube page. For any who may be leaving comments, myself and the guests should be able to see them. If you've got questions, you can plug them in here. But just know that I think if you're watching on my personal Facebook page, for some reason, I still haven't been able to stop to figure that out the past few weeks. If you are dropping comments on that page, I don't think that I'll be able to see them. We can see them after the fact and respond, but in the moment, I think you have to plug into the Trails Collective Facebook page or the YouTube page. So feel free to check those out if you want to plug in. So I am stoked for this evening's episode, or if you're watching this sometime down the line for the episode to come. We have a special guest on tonight, Krissy Moehl. Krissy and I have been friends, I guess, wow, time flies, for over 2 decades at this point. And I am grateful for that connection and friendship. And also have some supporters of the Trails Collective on with us this evening, which I'll introduce in a few minutes to be able to connect with Krissy and ask a few questions as well. And then we'll also have an RD, or an event director, from a new event down in West Virginia, Run the Summit. And we will bring Sarah in here in a second. So for this episode, what I'll do is I'll just run you through, as I do each week, with the hot list, some events registrations that are open and about to cap out. Just give you the heads up. It's always a bummer if you have a certain race that you are really looking toward and you get there and it's already sold out. So giving you a heads up there, registrations that are about to open for the same reason. A few that are racing this weekend that will be a bit of a focus or tie it into next week's episode, I believe. And then we will profile a new race with Sarah down in West Virginia. And then we will get into the front half of the episode, which will be our Trails Collective supporters and friends checking in with Krissy. And then the back half, just Krissy and I connecting on, well, you'll see what we connect on. So you'll just have to, well, stay tuned. All right, so here we go. So what's on deck for March 2nd, 2022? On the hot list, the single squatch 5.5 and 11 milers are on the warning track at 90% full. Enchanted Forest 6-hour ultra running April 23rd in Stratford, Connecticut, up a point to 96% full. The Blades 10 miler in Pocomoke, Maryland, running March 13th, is up 2% to 92% full. And the Breakneck Point Half, one of my events, it is now 95% full. And that is running on May 1st. So get in on that now. The marathon distance, which is Sunday the 1st this year, we split it into 2 days. We'll enter the warning track here pretty soon. I'm pretty stoked that that is one of only 2 qualifiers for the U.S. Trail team. It is Breakneck and some other small race called Pikes Peak out in Colorado. You probably never heard of it. It's definitely not as burly as Breakneck Point, but you know, good to be with them. Registration is opening this week. Piedmont 8-hour in Powhatan, Virginia, and on the Bacon Trail, the Naylor Mill Trail 7K. I've always gotten a kick out of that event. They are about to open. And then racing this weekend, the Trails Rocks Last Runner Standing in Rochester, the Dark Side 8-hour in Clarksburg, Maryland, and the Naked Bavarian Leesport, PA are on my radar. And this year, the Naked Bavarian, I'm not sure whether they got the tweaked course through this year, but a good series of events put on by Uber Endurance Sports, and they have a pretty solid, at least front-end competitive field this year. But their events, I've always had a good time doing them. So that is what's coming up. I am going to bring into the episode Sarah. And Sarah is coming to us from West Virginia with a new event on deck. Sarah, thank you for being with us here, and introduce us to, I guess, yourself and what you got on deck with Run the Summit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm gonna try and keep this brief. There's a lot going on tonight. So I'm just putting together a new race called Run the Summit. It's in Glen Jean, West Virginia on April 9th. And it's put on by Active Southern West Virginia. And Active Southern West Virginia is a nonprofit in the area. And all the proceeds from this event go to the free programming we provide. And one of those programs is Kids Run Club, which actually I was coaching earlier this evening. So
nice.
All that, that money comes to these these programs, which are really just designed to get folks of all ages moving and creating an active, healthy community culture. So a little bit more about the race. It's in Glenjean, West Virginia, which doesn't mean much to a lot of folks.
It kind of does. That's got some name recognition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things to see in and around Glenjean.
Yeah, we've got the New River Gorge National Park is adjacent to where the race will be at.
Not a small thing.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's like a great way to get people to come down and explore the area. And we just have a race that so happens to be right along the border of that. So this event will have a half marathon, 10K, and a 5K trail race. The 5K also has a walking distance to just kind of increase inclusivity for all kinds of mobility for folks. And the 10K and the half marathon would be more of a traditional trail race. And all of those trails are bordering the national park at the Bechtel Summit Reserve, which is this huge park that, just borders right along the national park. And I think this event is really great for people looking for a family-friendly kind of race vacation. We also have a kids race. It's free kids race, which is going to be super cute. We have some 4 and 6-year-olds signed up.
Nice.
So I'm really excited to see that.
Hopefully you could do a post-race recap and get some of those 4-year-olds to comment, just since 3 and 4-year-olds say some pretty awesome things.
They just smoked it, just all out. I love it. And so, after the race, you do your whatever distance you choose, and you have the rest of the weekend to explore Glenjean and Fayetteville and Oak Hill and all the areas around the New River Gorge.
Nice. And rolling course, anything aside from just the area being beautiful that's kind of, remarkable, or draws, or single track or double, or what you got?
But a mix of everything. So we've got some crushed gravel, we've got some double track, we've got some single track. This area was built by the Boy Scouts, so you can kind of expect mountain bike trails and things like that. So it's pretty flowy. There's a little bit of elevation gain, but it's nothing, it's not like going down deep in the gorge like Cabin Fever 50K last weekend. But so I would say of all distances, it's pretty runnable.
Cool. Right on. And remind us of the date? It's April
9th.
April 9th. And where people can go to find more information or to register?
Let's send everyone to Active Southern West Virginia. I guess that would be Instagram. So it'd be at Active Southern SWV. And would it be okay if I just dropped a link on the Facebook?
Totally. Yeah. You can drop it in the comments here as well.
Easier.
People are watching it after the fact. They can just kind of check out in the comments.
Okay. Yeah. It'd probably be easier than spelling it all out. So
yeah, totally. I'm feeling like a mental midget these days. And so even if you did spell it, I'd be all kind of confused and come up with some sort of other website there.
We don't want to know where it's going to send you.
Yeah, that's it. Not yet. Yeah. All right. Probably to somebody named Glenn and somebody named Gene, and I'm not sure how they are as a couple, but I'd probably find out. All right. So in April, then it'll be good to maybe reconnect. Maybe we can connect after the race, and you can come back on and let us know how it all went down.
Yeah. I really appreciate you giving me a platform to share about it. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Totally. Yeah. And we'll see if we can plug it more. So, Sarah, thanks for tuning in with us here, and I will check in with you next round.
All righty. Thank you so much.
All right. See ya. All right. So with us this week also, we have a number of special guests, and we are just going to do that and make us all some teeny tiny people. And let's just run you through. So format will be, I will introduce you to each of the individuals here, and let's just go from there, because then maybe that'll make more sense at that point. All right. So with us, we've got Kawana Dyer, Pietris, a relatively new transplant to upstate New York with a more recent span in Texas. It was Texas, right? If I'm remembering that right?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yes.
Yeah. And newer to the formal trail event scene. We chatted just a little bit briefly before we went live, and had been on the trails for a long time, just thought you'd find out how it was just jumping in and running some of them, let alone events. And we got a nice small world connection. She's rocking the Chuckanut 50K shirt, virtual edition there. So very appropriate for this evening. And she has run events up to 100K in that opening window. So nice work going all in, Kawana. And thanks for your support of the Trails Collective. Great.
And she's our newest columnist for the Trails Collective. For our community, collective wisdom, Kawana is going to be writing a column for us. So stay tuned for that.
Sweet. And for all those who maybe Ellie has already connected with and those are supporting the Trails Collective, thanks so much. And so we're basically just looking back at what people are using, what they're not, what's worked with the Trails Collective, what hasn't. And so as part of that, hoping to get more frequent guest columnists to feed into that collective wisdom. So Ellie, thanks for that outreach. And Kawana, thanks for getting in on that in advance.
You bet.
We've got Grace Hot Pants Langheim. And Hot Pants, if you've seen Grace in Hot Pants, you'll know it's very appropriate because the pants are, well, you can't really call them. I mean, really,
lots of people.
Actually, what were you going to say? Go ahead. Say
Lots of people have seen me in hot pants. Yeah.
Lots of people have. We should probably correct it at this point, though, because you probably have hot pants. But when I think of hot pants, I probably think of something that's more like purple and velour or kind of like a velvet or something.
I could make that happen.
You could make that happen, but yours more appropriately are hot shorts, and then I don't even know if I'd call it really shorts because I mean they're really.
It's kind of like you think about the roller skating era with the tiny little shorts and the kind of teeny tiny shorts that are really tight, and we called them hot pants. And I had a woman yell hot pants at me one time in a very kind way. Because my shorts are very, very short. And even if they're supposed to be loose, I had somebody comment one time, they were like, I can't do the compression shorts. I'm like, no, these aren't compression shorts. This is just what happens.
This is me, baby.
Have large hips.
That's good. And for those of us who are old, like Krissy and I guess Kawana, you're right in there with our age range.
I'm older than you.
You are older than me, which is
by a year.
Old. And I think I've got Krissy by a year, so we're pretty close here. But we probably remember the roller skating days. I mean, I know I do growing up and going to roller skating things with school, and they were awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
I still like to do it once in a while.
That's fantastic. And so Grace, also from the get-go, a supporter of the Trails Collective, a member of the Trails.
Supporter. I have no business being here. Like, I don't really do anything that interesting.
You have as much business being here as any of us except for Krissy, maybe. And then also active member of the PA Trail Sisters crew, which is great. And also has her good share of trail and ultra finishes. Most recently, the completion of the Duck, which was a good turnaround and is on deck for a nice FKT coming. So Grace, thank you for being on. And then some of you may know Krissy Moehl. And I just got to say that, and this was funny, Krissy, I think I mentioned it, but you probably just picked it up in the moment. So I think Krissy and I go back a ways, probably from 2000, 2001, something to that effect. And when I first met Krissy, 20 years ago, things are maybe probably a little bit blurred or distorted in my head, but it seems very visual, where we first connected both crewing or working at Cascade Crest 100. I was relatively newer to Seattle. Krissy was newer into the trail ultra space, had, I think, Chuckanut, and you
Might have been it.
I think you had one other. I think when I was actually prepping for this, I did look, and I think you had White River ahead of that. I think that was your first year at White River.
Oh, yeah, that would be right. Yeah, and
that
then
would be right.
Because then I got the Montreal job right after that.
Right, and so awesome, incredible time. But when we first met, whatever, casually introduce yourself as Krissy. I'm Ian. Where I don't know, the trail space is new. I don't know, and then we just start hanging out from there. But there's no media, there's no YouTube, there's no videos. There's, nobody is like a rock star like Krissy is at that point. And I don't know. And so I had a good friend in college, which had a very similar spelling to your last name. And her last name was pronounced Moehl. And so I had always just thought that your last name was Moehl, but I never used it. When we'd interact or see each other regularly, it was just, hey, Krissy, I'm never using your last name. And so it took us literally, I think, until you came out and did Cayuga Trails in whatever year that would have been, like
2015, 14?
Somewhere in there, right? Like 15 years or whatever it was after we knew one another. And I think I pronounced it Moehl, and in the moment I think it's mail to you, buddy. And I was in that moment, I just like, I thought you were kind of kidding, but then I was confused. It was like, why would somebody say it's mail to you? And I think I thought about it, but in that moment I was generally confused, because here I was thinking for 15 years of our relationship that your last name was pronounced Moehl. So Krissy Moehl is with us here this evening as a guest to go along. Part of my roots. She was one of my first experiences on the ultra front out of college, and very much, I think, shaped that segue idea of community and what was possible in the early time, or in the short time that we were together out there. It was really exciting to really hear of the adventures that you were on and putting together, but also the crew, hearing about the trail walker crew that was over, and you getting to know Horton and hearing about races in the East, and tying into, Jurek was somewhat known at that point, but the pod that you were a part of, it was really, really fun just to get to know you on the basis that we did, but also to have fun just hearing the adventures. Wasatch was still, I think, new at that point, and it was all just a young space. And so it was really fun. But so Krissy Moehl, for those of you who aren't already familiar, with over 100 ultra finishes, including wins at UTMB, Hardrock, Wasatch, Grindstone, Hurt, and a runner-up at Western States, Krissy is truly one of the greatest trail ultra runners in history. Growing up in Bow, Washington, before attending the University of Washington, Krissy was part of a truly incredible trail family, which we've referenced, which grew around the Seattle Running Company, and had stints with Montrail, Nathan, Ultraspire, and the Conservation Alliance. In addition to current race director of the Chuckanut 50K, her first ultra in 2000, and now which you've RD'd for over 20 years.
This is year 20. I'm celebrating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. She's a sought after coach, is releasing a second edition of her book, Running Your First Ultra. Is that still on deck to have just released March 1st? That's good. Well done. Congratulations.
March 8th is when it's supposed to be released, but I've been tagged on Instagram that people have been receiving them early, and I actually sent a note to the publisher and said, "What's up?" And she goes, "Let me know who's doing it. Those are not supposed to be in people's hands yet." I was like, "Oh my gosh." Oopsie.
Contraband product out there.
Wasn't my fault. I didn't do it.
That's good. Well, at least I know I'm not on the preferred list and getting the book early. But all right, so also truly, and probably most notable and significant, just a truly wonderful individual. Thankful we're able to pick a bit of time off tonight to connect with you, Krissy, especially. I know it's a big day for you on your end. So thank you. I know with the amount of coaching clients that you have, and probably also people asking of your time, I am grateful that we're able to pick a bit off tonight. Truly one of the greatest ambassadors Trail and Ultra has ever had. Krissy, thank you so much for being with us.
Wow. Well, this is cool. I love your scene and everything. Who's all watching? Do we get to hear from people over in this chat, or how does
yeah. So the first one in is, actually Ellie's on it. Sorry, I just reversed what you did, Ellie. I forgot Ellie's controlling some of the back end up there. So the first one to weigh in is Fred Morello. He actually is out of the strong Connecticut scene of trail and ultra running. They have a podcast, Connecticut Trail and Ultra Running, which they like to pick on Ellie a bit. But so there are people weighing in. If there are some comments that roll in, we can patch them through here. I try not to necessarily break conversation if it's happening, but we can also see the comments. So there's it's broadcasting to my Facebook page, to the Trails Collective's Facebook page, and the Trails Collective YouTube. I can't really see how many are on at any given time, but the episode will be live not live, rather, viewable later. So
Cool.
we'll have a number of watches tonight, but you can repost or go back to it or add comments later.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And this was something
Seeing all these communities, how people have become creative. Like you said, when we met, it was in a gravel parking lot with, I think, a line drug in this gravel to mark the finish of Cascade Crest, and these people were running 100 miles. And it's a little different these days.
It is a little different these days, and you've really seen it all, and we'll get into some of that here. But for this first half, so we're going to have Ellie and Kawana and Grace weigh in with some of the questions that they had, and just an opportunity to connect with you. And I took their questions and divided up into 3 rough concepts, which I can segue in here. So the first one is age and experience, which we kind of somewhat jokingly touched on earlier, but that was something. Krissy, at this point, you have a lot under your belt, and I typically have historically not stopped to really listen to other running podcasts or really catch up on other things. I've just continually juggling too much, and I just don't take in other running media, so I'm somewhat not in the know. But I did take in some of this prior to this episode, so I was able to weigh in here on some of what people have basically already connected with you on. And so some of this experience with the amount of wins, you've commented also, and just how I think you've evolved into the space where maybe you're more patient. You are choosing your events rather than racing a whole lot. It's important to you to keep running on a daily basis and keep moving, and events that would basically crush you aren't necessarily to be taken lightly. And so you've just commented in certain ways how I think you've grown into the person you are now and how you see things, and that influences both you and your coaching. So age is definitely an experience to appreciate it. So we've to weigh in on that question from Kawana and Grace and Ellie weighing in on some of those. So Kawana, why don't you lead us off there?
Well, this one's, I think, pretty light and easy, just for the number of races that you've been able to run and win, right? At this point, what is your favorite distance and why?
Oh, that is fun. I feel like I still answer that the 100 kilometer distance is my favorite. I haven't done it in a really long time. I would just add to what Ian said, like I've taken a break, like a conscious break from racing. The last one I really competed at was in March of 2018 in China. And so then throw the pandemic on top of it, and it wasn't even a possibility for a couple of years. So I haven't done the 100K distance in a while. I'm signed up for the Miwok 100K, and I'm really excited to see if I still love it as much. I haven't run over 20 miles in 4 years. No, I've done a couple of longer runs, but it feels like a really long time. So it'll be really interesting to see if I still love it the same. Did you ask why and why?
And why, yeah.
And why? It was because I like that you could be done in a day, but it was long enough that my skill set actually started to favor me. I'm not, the people laugh, I'm not fast. I just stay the same pace as long as the race goes. So I'm not the one that's going to go out and set a course record because I went out hard. I'm the one that's going to be able to finish at the same pace I started at, 80 miles later. So the longer distance, but the 100 milers, even when I was racing a lot, they just always took so much out. Like I love racing. I love running daily. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't able to run for a couple weeks after those. And that was,
you have to stop for a bit, I would imagine. I haven't done one yet, but I can only imagine.
Yeah, there's movement still involved, but it's a bigger tax and toll on the body. And people that can do these 200-mile events or multiple 100-milers, mm-hmm. I think the most I ever did in 1 year was 600 or 700-milers. And there's people that do them monthly, a couple times a month. And we've all got different, bodies and how we adapt and how we want to use our time, I guess, is part of it too.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Do I get to ask questions back or no?
Totally. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I just like back to you, like throw back to you in a similar vein. Like, have you fallen in love with the distance yet, or are you still thinking there's maybe something more that you're curious about?
Well, I ran my first 100K last September, and for me, that was it. I did a 95K the month before, self-supported, was supposed to be 100K, long story. Didn't quite work. The park closed and I had to leave. So I needed redemption. So I did 100K the month after and I was sold. I was just amazed at being able to go that distance. For me, like anything shorter now is not quite enough anymore. So next up though, besides another one of those is 100 miler. So I'm going to keep kind of testing the waters. But at this point, the 100K, like the way I felt after that, it was epic. So yeah.
Very cool. Awesome.
Grace, rolling in.
Okay. So I love to hear that you're a little bit human because the most you've done is 600 or 700 milers in a year. That's just ridiculous. Like, seriously. Because you don't do 100 every month. So I have to tell you, first, my, seriously, you were so beloved by so many trail runners out there. And in addition to that, female trail runners. So thank you for inspiring all of us. This was I have to tell you, this is, I have, of course, the fancy watch, right? So I got the fancy watch and Ian sends an email and I see it's from Ian and it says interview Krissy. It just says Krissy. And I see that like the preview of my email on my watch and I work from home. So nobody else is home or anything. Nobody else is home anyway. So I just go, mail? Fuck you. Because in my head, I'm like, I'm not gonna embarrass myself in front of Krissy Moehl. And I did pronounce your last name correctly. So
you knew it right. It took Ian 15 years, but
nobody was around to hear it though.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to ask you a couple of questions because I did hear you on a podcast recently and I wanted to dig further into a couple of things. One specifically was the new chapter, and I don't know if you added multiple chapters into the new edition, but one of the chapters you added had to do with, it was something about aging and that's longevity. Yes. And it was kind of glossed over. There were a lot of other topics that were awesome. And I wanted to hear more about that chapter. I'm 39 now. And I'm like, when am I supposed to think about these things? And then Camille at 40, right, just broke a world record. So apparently it's not 40. So at what point do we really need to focus on longevity? And could you just tell us more about that chapter and what inspired it?
Oh, I love that you broke into that. You have to remember I wrote this over a year ago, the whole book, so the actual specifics. But I do think longevity is a part of the thought all along. Like it doesn't just start at one point because like the things you do in your 20s, out fueling always comes to mind, sleep, recovery, the things you do in your day-to-day life are what are going to then equal longevity, right? Like how many, if you overtax your body by not fueling or sleeping or running too many whatever too many miles is, that like up for debate. But like that's where the longevity piece comes. It's not like, oh, now the clock starts because I turned a certain age. Like I want this sport to be a part of my life. And I knew that, I think that's actually the real gift is I knew that when I met Ian in my early 20s that like I'd been a runner and identified as a runner all through high school and college, ran at the University of Washington as a walk-on. But like I don't know if it's like fitting in or whatever, but just the energy that I put in came back through this sport. So I make a lot of decisions based on being able to do it forever. So like when I finished that race in China and I had this feeling of like, wow, I'm done. Like I'm done with the competition. I know I want to run daily. So now figuring out what that looks like those all play into that long haul. So in the chapter in the book, there's like a mentality approach to it. Like, how do you you're not like, oftentimes if I'm interviewing a new client, I'll I'll just make it really blunt. If it's just like a checkbox list, you want to run a 50K and call it good, I'm not your coach. Because if we get 3 weeks out from your race and there's like, yeah, you could run it, but, you know, like this hasn't come together, or we're seeing the stress in your life, or, you know, I might talk somebody out of running that 50K for their longevity so that, you know, a month from now, you'll be psyched to go run it. You'll have a way better experience at your first 50K. And then you've got this like this like kind of trail train heading that way. So, the mentality approach, like taking care of your body along the way, not letting niggles become injuries. I call niggles like those first things that you kind of go, well, can I run through it? Should I not? Like, don't let them become injuries. Do the little things. And then I think the finding your why, and that's a worksheet now that I also will make available on my website once the book, well, apparently the book's out there. We'll see. But like making sure, like when you sign up, Quanah, for this 100-miler, why are you doing it? Because like a belt buckle is not in my opinion, is not enough of a reason. Like when you get to mile 80, it's hard. If you like somewhere along the way, it's going to be really hard, and you need to be able to know why you want to stay in it. And if the why isn't like present in that moment, and you're able to go, that's not worth it. Right. Like that, you've put all this work into this experience, and then for it to like shoot out the door at that moment, because you also need to be able to go, that's my why, and I still need to stop and be okay. Because then that prevents that, like, oh, I've got this monkey on my back. Or like if you make the decision to not finish, you should like 3 months later be like, that was the right decision for me that day, and be confident in that, as opposed to that dragging on feeling of, oh, like if I woulda, coulda, shoulda. I would hope that you would have that confidence in that moment, because you've done the work and prep ahead of time to know that this is the smart decision for me to step out right now. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the bits that are in there. I'd have to I'm tempted to like peel open the pages and like, see if there's some other little bullet points that I could call out for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I love that you're pulling that in already with, you know, there may be a lot of people who are new to trail and discovering trail and ultra later on in life. And calling that out early on and saying like, hey, this could be something that you do for a long time. You don't have to do it all today, I think is a good message.
Totally.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for bringing that one up.
And then Ellie, you had a few from you still being in the young hot seat that you're in with, I mean, not that you've not been doing it for a while now, but I shouldn't even say going into the prime years, right? I mean, because you're, I guess, historically thinking, and Chris, you can comment on the physiology maybe better than I could at this point for sure, would be, you know, maybe whereas the prime years of women's marathoning maybe was bell curve top out at like age 36 or whatever. So Ellie, you'd have X number of years ahead of you before you hit that. I think when I was first getting into the space, the thought was, at least my thought was, that maybe an individual had a certain amount of top or full in like road marathon efforts, and then you're just cooked. Like that's if you're going to use the matches that you use, Ellie, or to a certain association buckets that maybe you've referenced to, Krissy, in some of the way you've referred to things, like you can only go to that well like so many times. And road marathoning, I felt like you had a couple hard efforts, but ultra, as we were getting into it, I thought it was different. I thought the intensity was maybe a little bit different, and you wouldn't necessarily cook your system like you would with the road scene. And then that proved not to necessarily be the case, right? I mean, we saw some of those around us and still pretty much like frying their systems. But then you also, to Grace's mention, you've got people like Camille doing what she's doing at the age she's doing it. Or last week, you've got Jeff Browning, who's continuing to do it at 50. Like it's pretty nuts. But so Ellie, assuming that you're, 10, 15 years behind us at this point, weighing in also on some of the considerations of age.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, what are the most important athletic investments that I can make now at the age of 30 to keep performing as I get older?
I like that, athletic investments. That's a good way of terming it. And I'm kind of piggybacking on how Ian led into the question a bit, like in terms of people burning out or what is our prime. And I think you're saying like, how do I keep this going? that burnout piece, I also wonder, the prime piece, is that an age or is that a number of years? Because like when I got into the sport, people were in their late 30s and 40s. I was 21. And so when I got to my 30s and 40s, I already had 15 years of, I was probably at 75 races at that point, where some people had just started at, like, they say 35. So in 10 years or 14 years, there's like that difference. So does that affect the prime? Like if you came to 35, maybe, having had a career and kids, and then you started running at 35 versus so those are questions I have. The sport is a lot younger now. It was rare people starting in their 20s then. It's not so rare now. Lots of people are starting younger. So it'll be interesting to see how all of us do. Is Jeff Browning and Camille, are they anomalies? Are they like these like one-off things that we can't necessarily model after because of what their physiology and makeup and background and everything? Or are there things that we can all bring in?
So I guess what I kind of meant was like, so for example, one of the things, like I started a couple years ago doing like mobility and a lot of strength work, and but not like lifting heavy or throwing weights around, just doing regular like body maintenance, foam rolling, hurdle drills, things like that. And I started doing that like a couple years ago. And just from when I started running, and now, like, I can tell my body is just much more durable. I mean, part of that probably is also I've raced more and my body gets smarter and stuff. But like I stop runs earlier so that I have more time to do mobility work and such. So I was just wondering if there were other things like that like, oh, you should probably like start that now. It might not be like an immediate, like, oh, this like made me 10 seconds faster. But like in 3 years or in 5-10 years, I'll be glad that I started it now.
Mm-hmm. I would say mostly for the habits that you're creating. That's incredible. Trying to get somebody that has been running for 15 years to start a mobility program when they just love running and would rather maximize those last 3 to 7 minutes of their run. Like, I'm just going to run. Like I'm typical, like I don't do my hair because I would rather run. Right. So I wash my hair and like, I'm like, it's just a silly example, but like there's things with your athletic investments that would be like good priorities. That is awesome. And that's a hard thing to train. I've had to learn it later in life. I was definitely the like run as long as I could, be at the computer with wet hair, getting my work done at, 9 a.m. or whatever. So those are great practices. The one, I always think of strength work, fueling, and recovery. And recovery has become a way more key word now than it ever was before. And fueling and sleep both play into obviously the recovery piece, but setting up good practices for that now. I do think that fueling, the conversations are starting to be even more broad and open, but unfortunately, and even in my era, gosh, did I just date myself there? But
Sure
coming up, like yeah, right. But being like light was a thing. Like the lighter you were, the faster you would be. And so there was a fueling, or I wouldn't call it an eating disorder, but a disordered eating approach, where there wasn't this like abundance or plentiful or as much as you can. Like that attitude towards food is still changing. Like I had an interview with some kids. Here I keep doing it. But,
did it again.
About fueling for their runs, and I was trying to talk about abundance and like when you want, and you could see them lock down, and I want to go talk to their coach in the sense of like what is being said to an athlete that they would hesitate to take in fuel after running. Because if we're moving our bodies, we need to fuel them. They will look however they're supposed to look. If like there shouldn't be like a food association to how you look if you're moving your body. And that's how I'm approaching it now. Does that make sense?
No, Ian, you should not. Ian should stop shaming me for my flaming hot Cheetos mac and cheese. That's all I'm going to say right now.
There's no food shaming, Ian. Stop it. Stop it.
If you could just see the picture of what she texted me, it was terrible.
I was like, I just listened to your high fat episode, with Jeff Browning, and he was like talking about nutrition. I was like, I was in the grocery store. I was like, I was inspired to buy this. It's like flaming hot Cheetos mac and cheese.
You just used the term nutrition to refer to it, though. There was literally probably nothing There's nothing remotely natural. Oh.
Like there's like 350 calories of energy.
There's fun. There's fun.
All right, there's that. There's that. I mean,
soul food factor.
That's how I get my hot pants.
But something's better than nothing. So, if you're saying there's, like you just said, there's 350 calories of energy, doing that instead of nothing is better in my book. Yes. Like I would rather you put something in than completely skip a post-meal fueling opportunity or full post-run fueling opportunity.
I should reach out to Frito-Lay and we can stock it at the store, Ian.
Or maybe now Krissy's got to do some shopping for Chuckanut coming up, and if that's a request for the 8 stations, maybe she's going to check out some.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
My next question was: you are very accomplished, and you're one of the best ultra runners of all time. But what's a personal accomplishment or task that you've mastered outside of running that gives you sort of like the same sense of fulfillment that, you sort of mentioned like since China in 2018, you haven't been racing. So what's something that like, if running were to go away in some capacity, what is something that you'd still be content with, like the Krissy Moehl that you are?
Oh, you took the question just a slightly different thing. I was going to say van life, because I feel like the fact that I could live in a van for 20 months, like that feels like an accomplishment, like learning about power and electricity and, figuring out places I felt safe to sleep. But I really don't want running to go away. So that's a hard question. So I guess that actually goes back to what Grace asked about like longevity. That is such a priority for me that I will knock it back as much as I need to in order to keep it as a daily thing. And that's, I think, where the decision to not race as much or do as long of training runs or whatever is so that I can keep it present. But like you, like I do find other things, cycling, yoga, weightlifting once or twice a week. Like I do move my body. I've actually got into dancing. I've joined this thing called Club Mob, and you can like learn these different dances. My dream is to do a flash mob someday. Like if I wasn't a runner, I would be a
Chuckanut. I'll follow you.
Yes. So I would find something else, but I'm pretty content to stay focused on how I keep that running form of movement in my life.
Yeah, a lot of times in my training journal, I write, don't be greedy. And it's just like, take the miles that you have. Don't wish that you did another or something like that. It's just, I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
So are we all meeting up at a flash mob? Like,
yes. With flaming hot Cheetos.
And hot pants.
John, he's great. Flamin' hot pants Cheetos. That's happening.
Yep. It's good. We can probably work on that. That could be one of those sponsorships. I don't know how long I don't know how Coke is not embraced as an example. Coca-Cola, the like trail ultra space, the amount that's out on courses and consumed to not really be directly pandering to athletes or even using it in ads. Like I feel like that's a big missed opportunities, let alone even thinking about flaming Cheetos. All right. So moving on beyond the fact that Krissy and I are older, but Kawanna's even older. The next one were some questions about Chuckanut. Chuckanut is very personal for Krissy. It was her first ultra. It's in her relative neck of the woods. It shaped who you are, as the story goes. If to finish your first, it was as long as you were smiling at 8 stations, you wouldn't get pulled. And so very personal. And then to go on and direct it for over 20 years now, a big part of who you are, a big part of the community that's around you that you've been a part of. So a couple individuals, or a couple questions rather, weighing in on Chuckanut. So Kawanna.
So during the pandemic, I had it written out, but I'll just paraphrase it. So I remember during the pandemic, because so many races were being canceled and I was bound and determined to run my first ultra that year, I started signing up for races that were offered virtually to try and also help the race directors that were having to cancel the races. And anyway, so I ended up doing the Chuckanut 50K, got the shirt, got your book. I love what you wrote in the book. You probably don't remember because I'm sure you signed a few that year and most years, but I noticed, so for me, it was a great experience and I felt good being able to support you. I'm N=1, but every little bit I think during the pandemic helped. But I noticed this year the race was back and I was excited to see that. But I just got to thinking, because I had kind of been out of touch, like, how was it during the pandemic for you? I mean, besides stressful, but like, how did the Chuckanut fare? You guys make out okay? Or was it like, I just wondering, like, what happened? Like, how'd it go from your end?
2020, we were 10 days out when Governor Inslee made events larger than 250 people, like took them off the plate. So the only thing I had not done was I had a grocery order written up and I had not delivered it to the co-op yet. That was the last thing that we had to do. Shirts were being printed. I went for a run and listened to Inslee's announcement on my earbuds, because I figured whatever news I get, I need to be moving, because it's going to suck if I'm sitting at a desk. And I ended up stopping in the middle of the interurban and crying. Like, I just couldn't believe, like, that was 18 years I'd been doing it. Like, what, something could actually stop me? Believe me, the wind, the rain, we've had ice, we had my parents' basement flood, I blew up my dad's truck. Like, there's been so many things that on the back end that runners don't know about that could stop the race. And like, it took a pandemic to stop us. Maybe we'll just put it that way. And I called the screen printer from the trail, like, please stop. Like, we can't do, I don't want to screen print 600 shirts or 300 shirts. Anyways, it was really devastating initially. But then the community, like, as everybody's going through it, you're just having your own personal experience and seeing that, like, we're all in this together. The Ginger Runner, Ethan and Kim Newberry, they were a month after us with Tiger Claw. And then we created the Race Directors Collective. There was 8 of us out here on the West Coast that tried to come up with it ended up being 9 pages. It started as like 50 pages of how do you put on an event in a pandemic? Like, so the rallying of race directors together, along with runners and stuff too. I'm just answering your question specifically, but the way that people tried to come and like deal in the moment was really cool to be a part of. So I feel thankful for that. And then we got creative for the shirt that you're wearing for the virtual event. We didn't feel comfortable. Our community's been very conservative, and we wanted to honor that in terms of how we came back to events. And so we did all virtual in 2021 and created these segments. So the January and February had segments, and March you ran the whole race. And it was really cool to see how that built up for people. And I had it was mostly women come up to me, because I went to the course on what would have been like race weekend and the weekend before, and saw people. I ran up and down the interurban so many days asking random people, were you running the Chuckanut? And if they were running, I would turn around and run back in to Fairhaven Park with them. And there's a couple of women that were like, I wouldn't have thought I could do 50K. But the fact that you'd set these segments up, I thought, well, I can run, 6 miles and 4 miles and, divide it up. Mm-hmm. So then in January, they ran the 50K, and then over 6 days, then they did it in 2 days. So they tried on one day in March, and like the look of disbelief, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? So
that's cool.
We still got to have that bit. And so we've carried the virtual forward. So then coming out of the pandemic, that was a lot of work we charged half the amount of money and got a third amount of registrants for the virtual year. Mm-hmm. So, and it was all new. Like, I know how to put on this in-person race. It's a lot of work, but I know how to do it. That was like, we are creating from scratch. Right. So the nice thing is, like, my co-RDs have been awesome in carrying that forward. So that work can still have a place and do the virtual alongside the in-person event. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, I'm just so excited to be in Fairhaven Park on March 19th. Like,
it'll be special, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Like, are you able to join us this year?
Well, I wasn't planning on it, but in person, no. But if there's a virtual, I could probably wing it, although that doesn't tie in well with the longevity part. But I could probably wing a 50K. But yeah, I had mentioned somewhere that my sister actually lives out in that direction. And so eventually it would be pretty awesome to head out that way. I just have to obviously plan for it. But yeah.
Is anybody else on here coming?
Yeah, so let's jump to you, maybe, Ellie, and then we'll go to Grace. So yeah, Ellie, you weigh in.
Oh yeah, I'm coming out to check on. I'm very excited.
Oh, that's right. Now I remember why I know your name.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So what is something someone should make sure not to miss when they visit Bellingham?
Mm.
So I'm going to be out there for a couple days, hanging with Ian's brother.
Oh, well,
What
he'll
should
show
we
you around.
do?
We'll show you around. Where are we going here? I mean, I could go food, I could go trails, I could go.
Well, the day after the race,
Breweries.
you're not completely dead. We could do a short little run.
We are doing a run through the local running store, Fairhaven Runners, on Friday morning. It's just, I think it's gonna be like a 3-mile deal where we show you the new finish. As a new participant, it's probably like you'll follow the markings. These people that have done it 10, 15 years, it's going to take like, somebody standing in the middle of the trail, like, no, you don't finish on the interurban anymore. We're sending you into the 100-acre woods. So we're going to do a preview run on Friday morning before. I think it's like 8 or 9 a.m. I'll put that on the website soon. But you'll see the course. So there's other great trails, like Lake Padden is a beautiful, it's like 2.7 miles around the lake. It gives you a good sense of the vibe and energy here, I think. Galbraith is another one. The North Chuckanuts are beautiful. So we don't actually utilize the North Chuckanut trails. We are more on the south end, but there are like some really cool routes up like Raptor Ridge and Hemlock Trail and oh man, I can't rattle through it. I know them from running them, not like the actual names of them kind of thing, but yeah. So for running, yeah. And then there's like, even the urban runs, like we've got the Bay Trail or Whatcom Falls Park. Like there's ways to do urban running that can incorporate trails. And then you get a sense of town too. Like you can connect Fairhaven to downtown Bellingham on the Bay Trail, like things like that.
Cool.
Yeah. I love it here.
There was, good Grace, but I was actually just looking for it this afternoon, Krissy, and I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know, but I couldn't re-find it. So Jerry Lindgren, do you know who Jerry Lindgren is? I'm sorry, you well, you should, but that's okay if you don't. So Jerry Lindgren was historically one of the best distance runners that the U.S. has basically ever produced. But he was also out of Washington, and I think he did if I remember right, he also went to school at Washington. By the time he started University of Washington, he was already, if I remember right, had run in the Olympics, had already held a world record, and there was something else like along that line where just incredible before he even started. And then he was one of the ones that would basically go head to head with Prefontaine back in the day in those races. But he grew up somewhere in your neck of the woods, and he was a really big mileage runner. I don't remember what he used to do. He used to do, I don't know, 100 to 200 mile weeks, like all the time. And one of his runs was kind of like legendary. I think where I can't remember what town he was from, but he'd basically like run up to like, I don't know, whatever, like Mount Baker or something, and then run back, or it turned into these like 40 or like 60 mile runs, whatever it was that he would just, I don't know, do because that's just what he did. And that was like part of his training or whatever. But I'll have to look for it. I just, in case he was somewhat of like a local or Washington like legend, I thought maybe it would ring a bell, but that's okay if it doesn't.
It sounds like some lore I need to be aware of.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. I ran into him.
You made it up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I may have exaggerated there. I can't remember what it was. So it was along that line. I ran into him in the time when I was living in Hawaii. He kind of he disappeared basically off of the scene. I don't know, a couple decades ago. I just basically like vanished, just dropped out. And he was in Hawaii. And so I was actually at a group run at Nike Town in Honolulu or something like that. And he was just like out there, and he just showed up, and it was like, wow, like that's Jerry Lindgren. And he was kind of like almost like a hermit type individual. And he was, I don't know, running on like 2 fractured fibulas or whatever like that in terms of just the impact on his body over time. But it was like, wow, like that's where he is.
Longevity. This is what it's saying.
Longevity. Incredible. All right. So sorry for that little tangent there. But Grace, also you had a question or comment on Chuckanut.
Thanks. I don't want to forget this, by the way. Ellie, you're going to be at Bavarian this weekend, right?
I am. Are you?
Yes.
Yes.
I hope you pass me. I'm doing the 20 miler. You're doing the 40.
I'm doing the 20 miler too.
Okay, never mind.
Maybe she'll pass you anyway.
I'm going to be nowhere near her.
This is exciting. Oh, it's going to be fun.
So if you stick around for a few hours, I might see you.
I will. I have nothing else to do.
Good luck.
That is a good segue. So Krissy, Uber Endurance puts on a number of events. One of them this weekend is Naked Bavarian, and they put on they have a really vibrant community following around their events. So in case that's where Grace was going.
8 stations. It is a stacked race. And literally, I just signed up for it a couple days ago because I want to see the finishers for this. I am really excited about the men's 40 miler. I'm excited about the women's 20 miler. It's exciting. So that said, you know all about community races. Again, I wanted to dig a little further into, you talked about Chuckanut and how it's a community race and the community has embraced it. And I dabble a little bit in race directing. Of course, Ian, he race directs some big stuff, right? And I wondered if you could talk more about that and there's a couple of races that I'm looking at creating, right? So if you were to be creating a race now, what advice might you give to a race director to make sure it is embraced by the community and has that really great community feel, but it's still, well run, professional, all that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I mean, it's kind of one of those questions like, how do I become an ultra runner? Like, there was no path to say, you meet Scott Jurek when he's won his first Western States, and then you run with this person, meet Ian at Cascade, I'm sorry. So but when it comes, if I look in hindsight, I didn't have this path. I didn't say, if I do this, then this is going to happen. That wasn't how race directing unfolded for me. I just knew I loved the thing and I didn't want it to go away when the founding race directors said they were done after 10 years. And I took it over when I was 24. I didn't know what I was doing. So those first couple years were kind of mimicking what Doug had done. I remember printing off registrations and driving them between Seattle and Bellingham to all of the running stores. And then people would mail me a check for $13. And I would deposit it into my own bank account, and I would type everybody's name into a spreadsheet to create the results and everything. So talk about starting from the roots. But I think what that does is it's I know every level of this race from those early days, and it was all driven by this love for it. I guess advice for that is do it in a way that is sustainable for you, that you can keep that kind of passion for why you're doing it.
Okay.
Because I've been asked to do other events and I've turned them down because I don't have what I have for Chuckanut to do multiple times a year. It felt like I would have to make it more turnkey, and that's not what I want Chuckanut to feel like. So that was a personal decision. And it's also knowing my own energetic level, what I have available on an annual basis. If I also want to go race or, adventure or whatever, life is evolving and those things are changing. But I've stuck to that. And I think I come into it with such enthusiasm and ownership. I have 2 co-RDs now that have been with me for about 5 years, and I still correct myself because I'll say my race, this is mine. And I'm ours. I have to correct myself, but I have this. It's the most consistent and long term thing I've done other than my own running. So I feel like that drives a lot of it. And then the fact that our community, I didn't live here for a lot of the years that I was a race director. I've ping-ponged around the states a bit, or I guess between Oregon and Colorado and here and down in Seattle. But I've only lived in Bellingham since 2015. And so a lot of people that lived here and ran the race, everybody knows somebody that's run the Chuckanut 50K, but nobody knew who the race director was. And so it kind of created its own gathering, because this thing would pop up in Fairhaven on, the 3rd Saturday of March, and people would just like, oh, I want to go cheer that on or whatever. And then they volunteer and maybe get an inside scoop at that point. But it wasn't until I moved here that I would hear people talking about it those first couple years. And if I threw out that, oh, I'm the race director, it would be like, wait, there's a race director? Like, it was almost like it magically happened or something. Cause so like, I don't know how you advise on that. Like, don't live in the community that you put it on. That doesn't make sense. Like,
yeah. Well, no, I think that's really helpful. And I got approached to help with something not too long ago. And I have some extra space in my life for it right now, but it's not super exciting for me. But I have some other things that are very exciting. And I don't know. I'm going to think on it some more. I think that was really helpful for me, at least. One of the races that I race direct, I just love it. Every year I get so pumped up about it, and I'm not pumped up about this other thing. And I think that's a big takeaway. I appreciate it.
That's really telling.
I think it is in Krissy's comment as well as in Grayson, just how you're feeling too. And I've heard this expressed. Actually, another friend who was an RD was in the store yesterday, and he commented on this, where we've had the opportunities to try to assist other organizations with races. And I've tried a couple times over the years. He had tried a couple times. And to Krissy's point, like, you can't, like, I can't bring that energy. I can't do it. Like, I can't direct somebody else's race like that and feel sustainable or feel good about it or whatever. So, if that's the case that you're feeling, Grace, too, just know that there's a lot of us that just can't do that either. Like, maybe some people can do it for a living, but unless it's my race in emotion, I can't do it either.
Yeah.
All right. So
wait,
go ahead,
can I ask you
yeah, totally. Absolutely.
What event what is it, the one that you put on that you're currently involved with that you love doing every year?
So I do a couple things every year. I have, there's a series, the York Roadrunners have a race series, and I race direct the Dallastown Wildcat 10K, which is a very hilly road course that has an uphill finish, and people hate it. And I love seeing them puke at the finish. It's so much fun. And I hug everybody. And I have a very tiny women's trail running camp that I do. Okay. And then I have a couple fat ass things. So I have the Wild and Hot Turkey Trot, which is at the same time as the Road Turkey Trot, but we go in the trails and drink Fireball.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Those things are a lot of fun.
Very fun. I love that. Have you learned the Gore-Tex trick as a race director?
I don't know the Gore-Tex trick. What is this?
And I can get away with it because I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we put on the race in. Look at that. We put on the race in March. So it typically is at least drizzling, but head to toe Gore-Tex, because when you like hugging people, whatever they have on them, like Gore-Tex is an awesome barrier.
I like that. I've done rain boots. I have race directed in rain boots before. That was super fun because everybody's like the lady with the boots. That's the one you want to talk to. And I usually have a fanny pack because your hands are free when you have the fanny pack, and that has all my things in it.
That's a bold move. Bold move going with the fanny pack. I mean, maybe Krissy has certain takes on fanny packs since with her time with Ultraspire and other entities creating gear. A bold move wearing the fanny pack. Yeah.
I'll pockets from myself, but
fanny packs have more options for fun colors than Ultra Aspire. I do wear their gear when I run, but race directing, all about fanny packs with flowers on them.
You can wear it as a sling too. There's different options. I have one.
All right. So the third topic area for this front half, and hopefully we'll get back half the coaching angle. So Krissy, I have not been coached by you, but I imagine you're an amazing coach, sought after coach. You bring so much experience to the table, so much thoughtfulness behind it. So also I feel like it's synced with your path, right? I imagine you mentioned it in one of your other interviews that I was just listening to, where in the beginning or when we were first getting into it, like trail and ultra coach, like what? Like that wasn't exist. yeah, that didn't really exist, right? And if it, right, a few people, but it's one of the angles that now does exist and has been open to you, and also with the way that your life has gone in being somewhat nomadic at times or moving around. Coaching is one of those things that can very much fit with that, if not in some maybe ways benefit from that. But so getting into coaching, Ellie.
Yeah. So as I look towards this next year, I'm going to be doing a lot more traveling than I ever have before. So how did you get comfortable traveling so much without having really like a home base?
I don't know. I don't know if I got used to it. I think the drive to travel was so strong. It was hard at times to not have a home base. Like I think I do best when I've simplify it. I do best when I can picture where my bed is. And so like, even if I'm off and I'm, leaving for one trip, coming home, dropping one bag, picking up the other, this really happens. And then going, if at least I saw my bed, like I saw where home was. But there's been, the last 20 months, my bed has been my van. And so I've had to like change that thinking to not just the whole space. It really narrowed down to where is my bed. Like before it was like, I had my kitchen stuff and my couch and blah, blah, blah. And it got really, I had to have wherever home was to do well. When I moved here, I had my stuff in storage and I lived out of 5 duffel bags for 5 months. I was traveling so much and it got really disruptive, like internally. I didn't do well because my bed was in a storage facility with a bunch of stuff stacked on top of it. And I couldn't touch it until I found a home to live in, but I wasn't in Bellingham to look for homes. So if I let my mind go down that rabbit, it could be really stressful. Mm-hmm. So I think, since I've just in the last 3 years really found like a good meditation practice, I think I've always like had a connection to meditation through my movement, but now I have like a conscious, like, oh, this is what meditation is, practice kind of thing. And it helps me be really understanding of what the present is. Like right now, as Ian kind of hinted at, I bought a house. So after 20 months of living in the van, it closed Monday and I slept there last night for the first time on an air mattress. Aww. And my stuff doesn't get delivered till next Monday. And I could be really like just anxious about the fact that this morning I didn't have a pot to boil water in. I was just like, how, but like I have these things to do today, and just to stay like, this is what I'm doing, not like trying to like figure all of that out all the time. I think that applies to like it's a mentality piece of how you approach it. Like, how do you choose to approach traveling a lot and preparation? So if you see these books, like total spreadsheet dork, and I have packing lists for wherever I'm going. So then if it means I'm only home for 12 hours or 24 hours, like bags are packed, like really making systems so that your transition isn't super tricky or stressful, and having those systems. And I'm also reading, actually, I'm going to throw this out. This random book got mailed to me. I have no idea who sent it. It showed up. I didn't order it. I checked my backlog of Amazon. I did not order it. And it's called Vagabonding. And it was written in 2001. And it is so applicable to my mindset, like how I approach the world a lot of times. I'm probably even more grounded than this person is, but talks about how the more simple you can make it, like you don't have to have everything planned all the time. What do you need? Like, and I often got to the point where I was like, if I've got a credit card, I'm okay. Like I don't need to have X hotel reserved for 3 nights and then moving to here and then on to the next thing. And so it really depends on how you want to travel and what you're traveling for. But I think that I boil it back to mindset. It's like, because it can get really ungrounding and unsettling if you are longing for something else. If you're longing to be somewhere else or have something under your feet or whatever, it'll make the travel experience it won't last as long, I guess. Maybe that's like the longevity or sustainability piece or something. I don't know if that was kind of talking off the cuff there. I hope that was helpful.
No, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I was trying to wrap that also together conceptually with the coaching, because I feel like it's been able to kind of go hand in hand. And Ellie's been able to relate to you, someone that level too, where she has moved around and she actually also lived in a van for a bit.
Very cool. How long did you get to be in a van? Or do you still?
7 months.
7 months. Right on.
Yeah.
All right, and then Grace weighing in on also the coaching angle.
Yeah. Oh man, people who travel in vans. I grew up poor, and when you grow up poor and you've lived in trailers and apartments, like I have no desire, none. People are like, "Oh, it's a tiny house. It's so cute." I'm like, "Nope, I want a big house. I want a big house. I want lots of space. I want lots of stuff."
There. And that's all the different experiences we all bring to this, right?
It's the mindset.
Totally. Yeah.
So, like Ian said, you coach, right? And you wrote this book that has training plans in it. And the second edition, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for anybody listening, the second edition, you wrote it so that it can be written in, and you've got like the intention is like jog ear these pages, write in it, use the training plans and resources and all of those things. So you've essentially put something together so that people could like self-coach, right? Not everybody wants a coach or can afford a coach or whatever.
Yeah.
But can you then bridge that and sell us on, let's say there's somebody who has a coach, loves coaching, loves their coach. Why should that person read your book, and what are they going to get out of it?
Oh, thank you. That's a great lead in. I guess the thing I would say is like a coach offers perspective, right? And what I could put in these pages, the hardest thing about writing it was like making it one way. And like no one person is one way. So that's where the coach gets to be the sounding board and like work with your life. So then when somebody calls me, I don't get the question very often, but sometimes like, why wouldn't I just use your book? Why would I hire you? It's like, you can just use the book. That's why it's out there. And if you don't want to figure out how to customize these plans to your life, that's what I love doing. Like I want to know when you were up all night because the kiddo was sick or whatever. And so no, you're not going to go do your long run the next day. Let's switch things around. And there's people that can do that for themselves, like just like pulling in for like, I know I need to get these things, these 6 things done this week, and this is how I'm going to work them around my schedule. Then there's those of us that don't want to do that jockeying and have someone like point that out. And I'm so stoked that there's so many coaches now, because there's so many different perspectives. I really gravitate to this like first timer, like the one that's like just coming in, like what else is there, like just sinking their teeth in, they're oozing ultra running because they love it so much. And then I'm like mother hen, get out of the nest, because I want like go find. I've coached people for 8 years. Like it's not like I'm like you get like 6 months and off you go kind of thing. But as long as there's like that curiosity that's going in, once it shifts, if it shifts, and some people it doesn't, but if it shifts to like well, now I want to set my PR, or I want to take 5 minutes off my 50K time, I'm not your coach anymore. And so I think that it's lovely that we have so many different opportunities with coaching. So that kind of in a roundabout way answers the question. Like the book is just another perspective to add to your curiosity of the sport. And there are other pieces like another update we did on this one is the table of contents is more like an index. So if you have like a question, you could go and look that up and go right to the page. So it doesn't have to be a cover to cover read. So it can be more of a reference. So there could be some stuff like, well, how would Krissy answer this? Maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you've got another perspective on it that could start a conversation with a coach or running buddy or race partner, whoever. Yeah.
And can I give I was just going to say a quick plug on that to follow up. I actually use the training plan that Krissy has in, the previous version, the version that is supposed to be out already. That's what I used all last year. And it was great. So if anyone is wondering about the book, so here's another plug, I would get it.
Thank you.
Awesome. For sure.
I love that kind of like community mentality of it, because that really is, I think, what makes a well-rounded trail runner is getting this piece of advice from this podcast and this person who I ran with last weekend, and then this book I've read. And so which I have coach and I coach, right? So even if I'm coaching, for example, well, there's just another resource I can pull in, another perspective, because like you said, there's so many different solutions out there for different types of runners and different situations. So really, I think lends to that community just mentality that we have already about trail running, that there's not one solution that everybody should follow, like there might be with some other sports.
Maybe.
Nice.
Yeah. But I think that's why this one speaks to me. Being an extrovert, like, people, bring them all around.
All the perspectives.
I bring them all in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little overwhelming, but I do bring them all in.
And then we dance about it.
Right on. Well, if Krissy, if you're still good, I'm going to transition into this next wave. So Kawana, Grace, thank you so much for being on.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Nice to meet both of you. Chat with you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time.
And maybe we'll both end up at the starting line of chucking up one of these years as well, or connect, or maybe we'll be able to pull Krissy back out here into onto this East Coast stuff.
The East Coast. Let me see how Miwok goes.
Yeah. All right. Kawana and Grace, I will talk to you both later.
Awesome.
All right. See ya. All right. So Krissy, we'll try to feel this out. You let me know when it's time. But so it's been fun in the prior ones, kind of like you referenced in terms of running as a whole. Like there wasn't really necessarily a plan. I think with maybe one of the first route sessions here, I just thought it was fun to look back through some of the photos. And I guess being in the digital age that we are now, there's so much of a record of where we've been. And I don't dig too deep, but I think it's just fun to be able to look back and to celebrate and to reflect. And I think it also cues or makes some of the memories and maybe comments more visceral. So I am going to start. There's a handful here of, I guess, questions or concepts related to photos. And the first one is basically like a 4-part photo thing. So I am going to, let's see if I can bring it up here. Lead in with, bear with me and hopefully it doesn't get botched. I am going to lead in with that one.
Oh, goodness. I think I know where this whole series is going.
Yeah. So what would the Krissy of here, your high school days there?
That's 8th grade.
Oh, it's 8th grade. Wow, look at you. I mean, that's my vantage point of growing up as the kid who was always the short kid that never really sprouted up, and all of my dance dates were like a foot taller than me. So I'm putting myself in my shoes, and I probably would have been up to your elbow, maybe right there. But with your background, so putting yourself in those Krissy shoes, let me see if I can make it work if I do this. So you can see this, right? Is it still working?
Yeah.
Okay. So with this series, so the Krissy back then, of all the places that ultra would take you from Washington, I mean, you grew up in a really beautiful part of the world, rather. But as a kid back then, you couldn't have known the places that sport, that endeavor would take you, from Switzerland to, I think is this South Africa?
Yes, that's the Otter Trail, if I remember right.
South Africa to Tanzania. And this, we actually had a small world occasion or a connection here. One of my daughter's best friends here in town, her family actually lived in Tanzania for a while, and they were friends, I think it was with that individual. And so it just came up in conversation. Yes. And they were like, we lived there. And actually we were friends with this runner. And I was like, I think one of my friends was in Tanzania for a bit. And so it was kind of a nice small world connection there. But to Tanzania, so cool, to representing the U.S. as in world team, and I think that was in Europe, if I remember right.
France, yeah.
France. To down to Chile with Yassine. So,
Nuts.
yeah, like this is it's taken you to just some absolutely just amazing places, amazing experiences, amazing connections. And so I don't know, just thinking on that for just in a split second or whatever.
The first thing you made the comment about always being shorter or whatever, but I've always looked taller in photos because I'm so long limbed. So it's probably only like 5'2" or something, but
You did look tall there.
I just look long because my arms and legs are disproportionate. So I think it helps me as a runner. Like I like the length of my legs, but I do look taller than I really am. But the perspective or the way you took that in terms of travel, I mean, I grew up in this pretty small farming town called Bow, Washington, and went to, I mean, I loved my high school experience. I think most of what those photos represent to me is this attitude of like, I want to try. I'm in. What's next? What's possible? And like, I don't say no very well. And it's maybe something that I'm trying to do on an energetic level lately, because I just don't have the same, I still have quite a bit of energy. I don't know who I'm fooling here, but like, I love just having the potential and possibility. And that just seems to always open doors, whether it's for travel or like the way I bought my van was a totally like crazy story. Like I love how life kind of pieces together that way. And I made reference in the previous version of how, like when somebody says like, I want to be an ultra runner, how do I do it? And I feel like they're looking for the like, well, I went to med school, I took this test, I did this, and it's not a path of that. It's like, follow your heart. Where do you want to go? Answer yes, try it, and then be willing to divert paths. Like the Conservation Alliance, the time that I did there was a really telling, like when I took turns to that and then away from it, I look back at those points and be like, man, if I had stayed at the Conservation Alliance, I can see where my life would have looked and led. Like I would have stayed in Bend, Oregon, and a lot of wonderful things. And then there's all these like ping pong places that I ended up over here that wouldn't have happened. And neither would be bad. It's just like being able to see where like these choices you make along the way end up taking you. The other thought that just real quick it brings up is like, man, I had to think really hard where some of those were. So in saying yes a lot, sometimes you don't create memories. It's like there's so much sleep deprivation and like maybe not enough nutrition while you're out there. And then you come back from one and you're off to the other. Like, do you remember what you got to do? So there is a little bit of balance there.
That's
that maybe I'm not always in on. Yeah.
That's interesting. Right. And and I'm just dwelling on your response there in the second too, because knowing as long as I've known you, you were always off like on these adventures, but I could see how that would be a thing too. And especially in the context of how hard you were going in life, whether it be working or organizing or running, that's pretty right. And to who you are and what you were doing. I mean, each one of those is a really intensive venture or whatever. So maybe your earlier point, you're only doing 600 to 700s, which is right. A laughable concept in terms of only doing 6 to 7, right? I mean, you're no Hans Dieter Weiser, whoever, but like who's doing 600 to 700s a year, let alone how you were doing them. I mean, that's wild. All right. So let's go with this next one. And I don't even remember where I pulled this one from. I don't think it was your page, but I love the photo. Maybe because it has some meaning for me as well. You're not going to be in the photo, but I love that it is given the color treatment that it has been. It speaks to me to, I don't know, like thinking back to like a simpler kind of like fun time, but also really speaking to the community that you were a part of. And
oh my.
Right. And so just like you touched on it, right, with the community around the Seattle Running Company, and that was your segue on just running with the boys or whatever, and welcoming you in and establish maybe your level of like competition, But here, where we just mentioned some of the butterfly effects and spun off, right, where these individuals also went and their impacts in the world and the trail scene. And this was 2003, I think, if I got the date on my tag right. So, I mean, that's got to flood in some memories for you in terms of looking back on it as well.
Oh, those are all the guys that got me in right away. Except, is that Mark Godell?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I don't think I knew him, but I think that I remember.
The hat and glasses were kind of throwing me off on him a little bit, but then I think it's Mark. The other three are super identifiable in my world. Ian Torrance, Hal Kerner, and Scott Jurek. Oh man. Yeah. And then the van behind it. I mean, that could be like a Patagonia photo in terms of like Yvonne Chenard, like talk about legends, like, you know, what else would I say? And like how they've all gone off and spurred their own running communities. Ian through coaching, Hal through the store, Scott through like public speaking and the Boulder community and everything. That's
Right.
a really cool photo. I like the coloring and everything. Like you said, it makes it
Totally.
talk about era, right?
Right. Talk about era. Right. Our era, I mean, clearly we had the technology at that point where the photo could have been cleaner, but that to me gives me the feeling that I have in just thinking on that time. And I don't think I think I've met the three of them like in passing or whatever, but didn't know them with like any depth, but still just knowing who they were and how things really spun off from those is, I don't know, it's a pretty cool feel. And so it just speaks to, I mean, I don't know. Let me stop sharing this here. The kind of spin-off effects and thinking of early in the sport there. I mean, you're still traveling quite a bit. Do you feel like you're still seeing the same communities? Like, can you do that again? I mean, yes, there's trail pods. Like Boulder was a pod. Bend became like a huge pod. But it's almost like there was a one shot to a certain extent to, like, maybe we were second generation getting into it, whatever. There are obviously a lot of ultra people that were in it before us, but it seemed like that was a renaissance of sort, and to go from there. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's new people, there's new races, and maybe it's just from my vantage point, but can you do that again? Do you still see those happening?
I think it's just happening on a much larger scale, right? Like, because the other piece, you said this before with technology, is that we didn't have the way to connect when we weren't at the events. So we would either meet up and go trail running if we were in our local community, or we would see those people so in that photo, Scott Jurek and I would train together, right? Because we were in the Seattle community. And then we would see Ian and Hal and Mark at events. It wasn't like you then like followed each other on Instagram and knew what that they were having kids or getting married or like all the other life stuff. You only found that out if you got to share time on the race course with them or sitting around whatever said potluck was being hosted at the finish line afterwards. And there's a different kind of bonding that way. So now you show up at races, you know all this stuff about any person you choose to follow on Instagram, vice versa, follows you on Instagram, knows that you've done 3 other races before you even are standing on the starting line with them. Like the conversations are different now. So it's on this like information larger scale, and then the numbers of people. Like I joined, there's this women's FKT project up here in the Pacific Northwest. It's awesome. They're trying to tip the scales, like in terms of how many women's FKTs are set in the Pacific Northwest relative to men's, because it's just really skewed. And so they're put this huge initiative towards it. There must have been 70 women on little screens on Zoom. And wow. I was like, there were maybe 70 women in the sport when I got into it. Like I knew all of them. And now I just logged onto this screen and saw all these women that are talking about setting fastest known times around here. Like, it's just incredible how the growth is. So like, to answer your question, I don't know if it can feel the same because that is so unique to what those times are. But I do believe that there's like similar sense of community being formed. It just, it's with technology, it's Zoom screens, it's then meeting up and having those like smaller experiences like we had, but that was how we had it. We didn't have the other beef to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I guess, and that's that's good points, right? And in that sense, it does reinforce that even if some elements, it's not going back, because yes, that is still happening. But I guess I wasn't really thinking about it in that sense until you just said it, where, I mean, to your point, that really did color the emotion, the connection, the experience of the events. There was so much more there. And not that that still doesn't happen, but you're right. It's not nearly as deep or potent or in that regard meaningful for community as it once was around that time.
Or but I guess I would also argue, like, why is it less meaning, like, to know more about somebody before you stand on the starting line? That's not less meaningful.
No, it just changes the meaning, right? Like it's almost like spreading out that relationship with somebody, as opposed to fusing it all under one event. So when you show up at a race yesterday, so maybe still sharing the time, you're sharing the space, you're connecting over a common effort. But I think it still changes, because then it's more consolidated around the experience of that event, rather than this being the interaction, how you share with people, hub out there. All right, so let's go slightly around the same time it was happening. And this was a common thread that has been in the root session so far, and it's really very much, and I know that Ian had come before you, but this was, so, all right, well, I'll just bring it up since you'll already know where I'm going, but the and I've got two here, but just, yeah, like those days, like there was the Montreal.
It's got to be Hardrock.
I think that it is based on, I mean, you've been so many places that it could be elsewhere, but landscape looks like Hardrock. With you folding over the number, like I can't tell, but you know. So if you're
pretty sure that's Hardrock.
So
a baby.
You do, you totally do. Like on the upper and like the sunglasses, you do look like a baby. But the Montreal shirt, with you had created something there that was such a huge thing, right? That represented the family, the gathering. I don't know who made the comment, whether it was Sean or Lewis earlier, was that, like, who wasn't a part of like the Montreal team back then? And it was kind of a joke, right? But you had created this huge team and community, and you not only did it with your you and Montreal and those around you. I shouldn't just say you. To your point of chucking out, there's definitely for sure a we there. But to know small part of what you were doing, because it took a lot of energy, it took a lot of intention, it took a lot of inspiration, a lot of emotion. But you were able to pull together something that not only represented your own community, but was pulling together really a nation of similar communities, where you were in that pod of Horton's pod on the in the northeast flank, and Montreal, who you were working with at that point, naming shoes after races. Like, you just don't really see that as much anymore. And you created something special. And now this is, I think when I mentioned it to Jeff had felt like he's much closer now to his ultra teammates than he was to maybe that larger team back then, because there's so many more people. But that space has also really changed, because you were really creating that space. And now all the other companies that have entered this space since have trail companies and maybe sponsoring some trail athletes and have networks, but it was really kind of a model that you were instrumental in being a part of.
Am I answer?
I guess no. Yeah, that's funny, because there was one of your other. I think what else? You did another interview.
If I could add. Did you see the ultra running meme that was put out recently? It was something. It was just like words, and all it said was, "If some old guy shows up in a Montreal shirt, watch out," or like, "Be prepared to get your ass kicked," or something. Because like there, and then somebody made the comment. I only saw it because somebody tagged me and said, "Doesn't this sound like Topher Gaylord?" But then somebody else was like, "Well, that would have been a Mountain Hardwear shirt," and then, but that was 10 years later, and then. There was something. Oh, what about a Sunsweet shirt? So like all these, like, I was so. I mean, talk about like back in the archives or whatever. But yeah, the hearing like the the first brand to commit to the trail running world of some of the newer brands that are coming out now. And I was like, no, like that was Montreal back in the day. Like no other shoe company. Adidas had the, what did they call it? It had that heel flap on the back of it, the All-Terrain something. Do you have one of those old ones?
Well, I've got the original Adidas Marathon TR here, which was well ahead of that. But to your point, it still had the kind of finish thing, but
blood flap, whatever.
But yes, that, yeah.
Yeah. But like no brand
trail
that had been trail only to my, like in the early 2000s. So to say like 2010 and beyond and say, oh, like only trail running brand, I was like, no. Like, but then there's like that ownership, right? Like that small team, there was 25 of us at the Montreal office, maybe up to 40 at one point. That was a pretty small crew that was making all that happen, from production to, marketing to accounting to everything, shipping. That was the crew. So there's a pretty special time locked in there. That was 6 years of my life, from 2001 to 2001 to 6. Yeah.
And such a vocal thing, or a focal thing, rather. And also just instrumental. Like I see the other teams, and I imagine in like raw dollars or actual dollars, maybe companies, Hoka, whatever, spending a ton more in this new space. Way more. But in terms of focal, like brand space, like I don't think that I've seen it since Montreal in terms of like that devotion.
I mean, you got to remember that was when sponsorship was like a couple pairs of shoes a year and a jersey. There was no cash. And Scott Jurek did Western States on his own credit card. Like there was very little cash, if there wasn't cash involved for athletes. So like a totally different time in terms of purse strings. Of you're talking about money and engaged there. Like I had 80 athletes and 100 events, and there was all giving away water bottles and product, and asking other brands to help, team up and make my package look, package delivery that much better to each event. And
all right, so let's go with this next one. Spinning a little bit. So you commented, I think it's somewhere, one of your interviews, that it took you a bit to get, I think, feeling confident in the mountains out there on your own. Like it took you a while to get into the mountain races, to approach a Hardrock. You had seen it, you'd been comfortable with it, you were scared of it, approached it, did incredible, which speaks. One of the questions, all right, a slight tangent, and then I'll go to this photo. One of my initial questions was just going to be, and this just made me think of it, and thinking of you and Hardrock, and maybe one of the articles, maybe from, I don't know what magazine it was, like years ago, where they were breaking out your splits and where you closed. And to your point earlier, where you're not necessarily fast, though I dispute that, you're still pretty quick, but you're able to hang on, and you're able to maintain your pace, and you're able to close hard. And so you end up being able to close as hard anyway. So like in Hardrock speaking, I think Jurek closed faster than you. Maybe Carl did that year, but otherwise I think you were either second or third in terms of your closing speed. Like you're able to maintain. And so speaking to how tough you are, like one of the questions is just going to be like, what makes you so damn tough? Like you really are. And I know that's a very tough thing for you. And I was going to, I know even your facial expression there, because you are like, you're ridiculously tough. You take almost like the heart of the race in these hundreds, and you're incredible. But you're also so humble, right? That I know that makes you squirm, and that's, I don't see it that way, but there's something where you are like, you're phenomenal. And I'm sure you've had physio testing done like over the years, and maybe you could be like, my VO2 is not that much. Maybe my muscle makeup, my whatever efficiency, lactate isn't that different. But there's something in the way that you're wired with your central governor, that there's got to be some element where you're able to be so, and you've also commented on embracing, sorry, I'm throwing out multiple concepts here, being able to be so present in the moment, emotionally, spiritually, embracing it for what it is, correcting things that go wrong. But you're able to be maybe so confident, and maybe you doubt that. Maybe you're like, I'm like everybody else. I don't have certain confidence in certain moments. I have the same fears or whatever. but there's something with your central governor up here that you're able to take your body to places that 99.9% of people, even if they tried, even if they trained for it, can't take them. So like, what's that X variable? What's in you that makes you, and it can make you feel awkward, but so incredible?
I want to come back with some silly comment like, well, I'm German, so I'm stubborn.
Yeah,
you know,
right. Knee-jerk reaction, but there's something the way that you're wired that you can tap into something that most people can't.
This again goes back to like how I was talking about how Chuck and I, like, I didn't approach it with a plan of like, if I do this, then that. So this is all in hindsight to be able to think this way, but I've done a lot of reading and listening to podcasts and interviews about like how we work mentally and like sports psychology and things like that. And something that has stood out to me was how so many athletes have to work on like a positive mindset. And there's this really deteriorating mindset that can go for a lot of competitive athletes where they doubt themselves. They don't think, like, they don't trust their training. They can come up with every excuse and really ruin their mental state going into an event. And there's been multiple times when I've like heard people talking either in interviews or asking me, and I just have this, I can have it in every other aspect of my life, that self-doubt, but I don't have it around running. And so I can think about going to events, and I didn't have to convince myself to think positively. I was just doing visualization. I was prepared. Like, I had this positive outcome thinking in my head going into it. Like, I remember, gosh, there's a couple, Tahoe Rim Trail, FKT, that's not even that long ago. It is now 7 years ago, but relatively in this conversation. And I came home from Europe with some sort of dysentery and lost 10 pounds in a week, like hydration, right? Like everything was going out or up. And my mom finally took me to the ER. I was so nauseous, I couldn't eat. And I think I only had 10 days of like finally getting rid of that bug to actually eat. And I think I did 1 4-hour run in the month of September before running the FKT. And all I did that 4-hour run for was to see if I could eat. Like, can I run and eat? That's my that's my test. If I can eat, I can run, kind of thing. But like sitting, like literally that was when we talked about earlier, when all my stuff was in storage. I was living out of 5 duffel bags. I was at my parents' house for a little bit of that. And those 10 days, I was like on their couch or to the bathroom. I didn't even step outside. I was in such a bad state. But instead of getting bummed out at that point and thinking like, this is over, because I had 12 people flying into Tahoe to help me with this thing in 2 weeks, or I guess it was 3 weeks at that time. I was emailing sponsors, telling them where I was at, but that I still had the best intention to be there. I poured tons of time into making spreadsheets. Like, I'm a spreadsheet dork, but those ones, like, I just made them even better. Like, whatever I could do to like manifest this thing happening. And then if I like, there's still 24 hours in a day. And if you're just sitting on the couch, you can do that for so long. I binged watch Friends so that I would laugh. Like, I just stayed in this positive mindset for those 2 or 10 days. And then I started driving to Portland, still a little bit sick, and then drove down to Tahoe. And then I ran in the San Francisco Bay Area with by myself, but from Kim and Topher Gaylord's house. And then went on to Tahoe and then broke the record by over 2 hours, I think it was. It was 49:11. I ran 47:28. And so, like, I guess to answer your question is like, I got to believe it has something to do that I've never had to battle demons as it relates to running. Like I said, I can deal with them in many other aspects of my life. But when it comes to running, that is a really positive space for me. In a lot of realms. And that's why I think it's so important to keep it positive, like to not run myself into the ground and to not over race, or because if things are awry in other aspects of life, I know I can need
that. It would be, and so it's, I guess it can be that subjective subjective report of it, connection with it. And I think that have you done any other tests before I say that? Have you done any other tests where you're any physiological variables or anything?
Test multiple points. I have a higher for women. I'm at I think I'm between 62 and 65 when I last tested, which was in my early 30s. So that's 15 years ago. So it's probably not as high now, but, or maybe it's close, but so for women, that is on the higher end. So that could be working my favor. I think we made the joke about my legs being long and my just being so limmy, but like biomechanically, I have not suffered through a lot of injuries. Like the alignment of my hips to knees to ankles is good. So like I'm not dealing with like knock knee or bow leg or some other biomechanical issue that could cause wear and tear in a hip or a lower back so there's some biomechanical advantages, I gotta believe. And
then to your point, sorry, keep going.
Constantly trying to learn, I made the comment of lighter is better. Like I definitely battled with disordered eating throughout my whole career, whether it was some sort of depression going on in life, and so I would counter it with not eating enough, or you can see it in photos, like how my weight can change here. I can be Skeletor or I can be healthy, or healthy. I don't like that word actually, but I'm curious. Yeah. And so I'm always going to learn. So I know that is not good for my body. So even though I have a tendency, if stress is high, I don't eat. I know that now. So I've learned enough about it that I'll keep, and that's what's keeping me in the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I don't think I've dissected your physiologically. I mean, obviously I know what you look like, but I've never really, probed too deep on it. But since you're mentioning it in the moment, I guess that would make sense also though too. I mean, physiologically you do have great posture. You've got a little bit broader shoulders. Your arms can act more like pistons. Your legs are powerful. And this speaks to you've done the right things too, right? I mean, you've been consistent with running. You haven't been injured. You've done a good amount of strength training, maybe in the right way over the years. So not to discount all the amazingly hard work that you've done. I mean, that's for sure as critical a part of the puzzle as anything. But then you do have the physiology to support it. And then the crux, that third tripod, is that mental confidence. I don't remember who it was. Somebody, it may have been Jack Daniels back in the day on coaching, or maybe it was either Jack Daniels or Tim Noakes, commented on the 3 things that an elite runner absolutely has to have. They've got to have the genetics, they've got to have the training, and they've got to have the absolute belief in themselves where they can absolutely visualize that positive outcome without a doubt. Like maybe they're hurting, whatever, but there's no flinching there. And so I guess really you do bring together those 3 elements effectively, which is cool. All right. So
does that go back to just being German? Stubborn?
No, it doesn't. There's a lot of fat, unhealthy Germans eating Cheetos that are not nearly as tough.
The very first answer could be why.
Nope, not it. I'm not going to buy that.
Okay, maybe I've got one more in me. I've got a little doggy that's been sitting in the office way too long today.
All right, so
she should come say hi. Do you want to come say hi? Oh no, she doesn't want to say hi.
Never mind.
That's fair, and that's her prerogative. All right, so let me see the last. I think I had three concepts here left. Let me see which one to go on. All right, give me one concept, and then you're just going to give me a fun story to close out. All right, so let's go with, and I don't know, maybe it'll be fun, maybe it won't. There was going to be one photo of an FKTU Wonderland Trail because it seemed like that was an amazing experience for you. I know that is an absolutely wonderful route. There is going to be another one of places you've gone and the cultures in some of the other countries, and seeing you in some of these phenomenal areas and supportive. You basically being a rock star in certain areas, which has to be kind of weird for you also because you're a really humble person. I know you make the face there because I know, but like you also have to recognize that you are, right? And I think that, you go to a place like China or wherever and you are. So
I've signed autographs on the back of people's like $100, $200 jackets, and you're like, huh? Me?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun. So for all of those who know you too, like know how grounded you are and how just nice natured you are, to know that just makes it all the weirder, I suppose. Yeah. So all right. But let's go.
Okay.
this. And PD, thank you for being patient. And I think it's
You said that I've become patient at some point in this interview. I think that's why I'm still an ultra runner, because that's the lesson I need to learn is patience.
Yeah, well, PD, help us here in patience here. But it's also funny before it's right up. All right, I'm gonna get here. I'm not gonna drag it out too much. But there's other tangents before I knew what PD stood for, because I didn't look it up. I saw a PD here and there. I was like, oh, maybe it stands for pet dog. Like that. It'd be really simple. She named her cars these really basic concept names. Maybe it's just like pet dog, but I think it's pretty awesome that it's named after Hardrock. Yeah. All right. So let's go this here, and I promise I'll get you off here pretty soon. So this concept here. So knowing some of the different periods in your life, whether they're going really well, whether there was certain discord in other areas, knowing how much this has been a part of you. And I think it very much speaks to not only like career paths that you've chosen, but it seems like this is your piece. This is your independence. This is you being you. This is you connecting with your communities, pursuing the things that you love. So, I mean, have you introspected on that kind of on this space, whether it be the van tendencies, the beautiful places that it's gone, what it's meant for you, where it's maybe recentered you to a certain extent in periods of your life where you have grounding, but it's, I don't know, I guess it's a very kind of, I guess I'm not pointing to a very clear concept, but it's kind of what I'm getting at is how much it really touches the depths of who you are, and I guess the path that you've chosen and what it's meant for you, I guess, if that's possible to conceptualize and package up in this concept here.
Probably in its own episode, right?
Yeah, and that's fair. That's totally fair. Right, yeah.
But the van, I am so thankful that, like, well, the funny thing about the van, a lot of people thought that I would like be a van life person. Like that would be like, I would move in and that would be it. And like, even when I bought it 1 year prior to moving into it, but I always bought it as an adventure rig. I never bought it to be a home. So I think there's this like perception of other people's lives, period.
Yeah.
And so, but the fact that I would like take 6 weeks every summer and live in my element and move around the West and visit people were like, oh yeah, that's totally her path. That's where she's going. And it's like, actually, that's what I love doing is I love adventuring and taking off from, but I have a home, like a groundedness that I need that Bellingham really provides for me. I love being here, this community, this like right here, Prime Sports Institute. That's like a hub for the community for me, and the Trail Sisters that I have here, and like the relationships that I've made with like dear friends that I know I'll grow old with, like in a physical, like you and I will grow old together. We've already spent 2 decades sharing in each other's lives. And then like in this, like, you know, seeing each other on a daily basis kind of sense of community is really important to me. So that said, like when I did move into the van, in my mind was to bridge the gap. 3-6 months, I'll bridge the gap to home ownership, like sell the condo, move into a home. And that turned into 20 months. And I think I would say about a year in, like I knew that was I'm glad I ended up having to do it that long because of what I learned in that space and what I was capable of. That was the answer that I came up with. Like, what's the other thing that feels like as much of an accomplishment? It was like figuring out how to live in a van for that long and like go through all 4 seasons. And so I learned a lot about like being alone, like time alone. That was really important to how I interact in relationships. So, and I couldn't have got that in some of the other settings that I'd been in before. So I think it's an adventure rig, and having had the time to live in it that long, I'm really thankful to feel set up for like another phase of life, if you will, like stepping in. Yeah.
All right, so that's a segue. Last question, and then one story. And the question isn't necessarily photo based here, but it was when you had mentioned in one, or I don't remember who you were talking to. And again, I was just watching, I think listening to you and some of the interviews and reading a couple of articles just the past couple of days. Like, again, because I don't really consume a lot of trail media or whatever. And, if I want to talk to Krissy, I don't know, text you or, see what's going on or whatever, rather than go listen to some sort of podcast or something. Yeah. But prep this just because you sure I wasn't just answering the same stuff. Cause I know you've probably told a lot of the same stories like over and over. And it's like, dude, like I just commented on that, like on a podcast a week ago. But you had commented on like the buckets, like the buckets in your life where you compartmentalize things like into buckets or whatever. And I maybe half know the answer, but at this point in your life, in your experience, in your running, part of me says that your answer will be like everything else. I don't totally know where this all goes. Like I'm in the moment. We'll see what happens next week. We'll see what happens next year. But what buckets are still out there that you're curious about that you feel like you haven't explored yet?
Oh, I guess I'm mixing up in my head because I talk about buckets. Like I don't have a career, but I have these buckets that support me energetically, financially, where I put my time. And
okay. All right.
That's how I talk about buckets.
Right, so kind of move the concept into buckets of like experience or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like what do you got? Where are you going? Like what are you curious about? What have you not done yet? What's on deck? I mean, maybe be like, dude, I don't know. Like, dude, I'll figure it out next week. But if you were to think about it in that way, anything that would come to mind?
I feel like I'm excited to get back to like travel a bit more. Like now
that you just bought a house, you're like, I'm out of my van. I just bought a house, and now I need to get back to traveling.
The house is a bucket. Like that's like where I'll put energy, where I'll put finances, where I'll put time. But it's also like, it could be financially, it could also be a bucket in another way in a couple of years from now, where like maybe it's a rental or something. And that van, like people have asked me, are you selling the van? Heck no, the van finally gets to be what I bought it for, an adventure rig. But also international travel. Like I feel like I definitely was a rule follower and stuck to the pandemic. And then when it was possible to try, and I was curious how to travel, like with the going through all the testing and being vaccinated and choosing that path to be able to participate in the world and see the world in a pandemic state. Like I'm so curious about what's like other cultures and being in different countries and like moving through them, how I do here. But I would also say like, I thankfully was stopped here for a couple of years and I've known it, but then really got to experience it of like, I live in an amazing spot. Like, why do I get on a plane for 40 hours when I could drive to the Olympics in 4 hours and see like a spot that people come to from all over the world? Like the North Cascades, same. It's like, I've barely dipped my toe in some of the stuff that I love to go see around the world, but I've got right here. So I think there's like more of a balance that I'm curious about of how do I still feed that wanderlust part of me with like this sense of home. And I think the house will be part of that. Like there'll be times where I'll have to take care of the house and I won't get to go kind of thing. Like, what like I have a limitation on, or I don't allow a lot of limitations, but I can be realistic. And sometimes that might be a part of balancing the how much away and how much home.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So last, and I had a picture of you and PD on there, but it was just to kind of get on the concept. I've had fun connecting with certain people and hearing some of the stories and adventures, and knowing that you've had so much time on the trails. Any fun story or a couple short snippets or whatever it is, or maybe you'd be like, dude, sorry, I don't have anything. On any fun animal encounters or experiences in your trail adventures over the years? Like Jeff had the run-in with a cougar and some other stuff. You've seen birds often try to attack him, and when he was at Cayuga, he almost got run over by a deer. Anything that you've had?
No, I've seen a lot of bear on the trail and I love it. Like I saw a grizzly in Glacier National Park and a couple of brown bears and then, or no, not brown, black bears down here and black bear up in Alaska. And it's never fearful. And if I'm with people that are fearful, it's so unique to me that they're having this like really fearful experience. And I'm just in awe of that we get to witness this creature. But I'm nothing like those guys have these, like the owl story that Jeff tells about Cascade Crest. I've heard that so many times. But I wonder if it's like, like Jeff Rose was one of the early people that put that in my mindset of me, like running into animals on the trail is like, approach them with the energy that they're presenting to you. And if you watch, most of them are curious first. They're not aggressive first. So if I come in curious first and respectful, right? I'm not going to like get up in their business, but if I'm respectful and curious, all my interactions have been that, just like checking each other out. And I don't know. But what I thought of was this Petey pup. I mean, I've run with a lot of dogs over the years, and now having my own that loves to get out there and share trail time with me. She's kind of picky though. She won't run roads with me anymore. She will like literally, she's figured out how to have me tow her. She's an Australian.
She 3 years? How old is she?
She's 6 now.
Oh, she's 6 now. Wow.
Yeah. But she's an Australian Shepherd. Like how many Australian Shepherds do you know that are towed? Like usually they're off the front. This dog has her harness and she knows that I will tow her if anyways, she's got quite a personality. So she's probably my favorite animal encounter out there.
Right on. Awesome. All right. Well, Krissy, thank you so much for taking
Thank you. What did we kill? We got killed 2 hours here, man.
Just over 2.
Sure, yeah. I'm sure Jeff Browning would have doubled that. But
yeah. Well, that's well, all right. All right. Well, thank you so much. I again value the time, and I look forward to whatever being in contact off of this platform more.
Yeah.
All right.
We will.
All right. Cool. All right. So, in anything that any thanks you want to give out there, any plugs or where to find you? I mean, I guess this day and age, it's like I don't know. I'll Google her and I'll find her. But anything that you'd like to leave off with or mention or anything?
If you know how to spell my name, you can find me.
Yeah, just don't spell it phonetically because if you're me, you're probably not going to spell it or get to it. All right.
But I'm really thankful that the community is doing what it's doing, and you like people like you have jumped into this new realm, right? Like we could be like, no, we meet at trail races and that's it. But like, look what you're creating here to bring people together in this virtual space. I'm sure it was really helpful during the pandemic, and you're carrying it forward. So I think it's cool that we've been around and we're the old salty ones, but we're still like jumping into how to keep, the community rolling.
We're getting to be the elders at this point where we've,
oh my gosh,
got stories
sage. I've been called the old sage. Like what the, Here we go. Awesome. But thank you, Ian.
Right.
I'm glad we got to do this.
Totally. Thanks, Krissy. All right. So for all those who tuned into Trails Collective live, TC Live tonight, thank you so much. To those who are watching it after the fact later and to leave a comment, maybe we'll catch it. I can notify Krissy if you've got any questions, and I will catch you next round. Next round, I think we'll do some events catching up, and either next week or the week after, I think we've got David Horton, followed by Scott McCoubrey. So thanks for liking the channel. Thanks for liking the pages. Thanks for providing suggestions. Thank to all those Patreon supporters out there who are supporting the Trails Collective and making this possible. Thank you. All right. So until next round, I will check you later. See ya.